Welcome back to Inclusive Design 24 2021, brought to you in partnership with our Platinum supporters, Adobe, TPJ Arc, Fable, and Intopia, and our Gold supporter, Tetralogical. You can follow us on Twitter at ID24Conf, and if you have any questions for the presenter, tweet them using the ID24 hashtag for our Q&A at the end of the session. I'm very pleased once again to be joined by a fellow grumpy man of accessibility, Gareth Ford-Williams. Gareth, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure next to introduce Lee Dale. So Lee's talk is titled, "There is no average person, why designing with intersectionality in mind is critical." Lee's talk will question the use of personas and the concept of average target users. So over to you, Lee.
Thanks very much, Gareth and Patrick. It's great to be here, and I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to share this with everyone. So I'm going to dig right in, and today I'm going to talk to you about why it's critical to design with intersectionality in mind. Now, at the heart of this is the importance of understanding that there is no average person. More importantly, already diverse markets are becoming increasingly diverse. And that's where intersectional approaches come in, and inclusive design offers a tool set for delivering products and services that better serve diverse markets. So let's talk about the people who make up the markets we serve. Here's a photo of a wedding party gathered outside for a big group photo. And in fact, this is a photo of me on my wedding day just 2 years ago.
Sorry, Lee, can I just interrupt you for 1 second? You're not sharing your presentation.
Oh, it's stopped sharing.
Sorry.
Well, that's here's a photo. As doesn't work well when absolutely no one can see it. Sorry, let me try this once more with Zoom. Thank you for that.
There we go.
All right. Excellent. Great. So for those of you who can't see the photo, it is a photo of a group of people outside for a wedding shoot. There are about 30 or 40 people there. And the interesting thing about it from my anecdotal perspective is that among this collection of family and friends are people who currently live in Canada, the United States, and various countries across the United Kingdom and Africa. And it's fair to say that the majority of the people in the photo are first or second generation immigrants in their current countries of residence. They're global citizens, immigrants, mixed races and cultures, all in one family and friend group. And this personal anecdote aside, this is happening increasingly so. So let's look at the data. Over the past 50 years, we've seen increasing diversity across North America and beyond. In North America, interracial marriage has increased 3 times since the 1970s. And now about 20% of annual marriages in the US are interracial or interethnic. And this trend, along with accelerating intercultural and interfaith relationships, is continuing to dissolve long-standing barriers between people from different backgrounds. And over the same 50-year period, the world has seen migrants grow from 2.3% to 3.5% of the world's population, now approaching 300 million people. The growth of urban centers also continues to bring people of all backgrounds together into diverse cities. In Canada, the vast majority of people have moved from sparse, homogeneous rural areas to dense and diverse urban areas over the past 150 years. And there are recent reports that show that rural areas are actually becoming more and more diverse. With these relatively recent trends, they highlight how markets are becoming increasingly diverse. But it's also important to acknowledge that markets have long been diverse. The issues lie in how we've served those markets as practitioners. Researchers, strategists, marketers, designers, developers, engineers, and business leaders have simply done a profoundly exceptional job of ignoring market diversity. And it's only recently that we've begun to collectively acknowledge these and other factors, that includes social, behavioral, and technology-driven factors, that really must lead us to reevaluate how we work. And for me, this understanding of shifting markets has led to twin passions of digital excellence and inclusive maturity. Together, digital excellence and inclusive maturity lead to transformative change, both within organizations and also across markets, those external groups that all of our organizations exist to serve. So let's unpack digital excellence and the three core values of inclusivity that together make for a very special combination. For me, not unlike the joyful combination of peanut butter and chocolate. That's the last humorous slide, so hang in there with me. Digital excellence is designed to support the following three organizational objectives. The first objective that builds towards digital excellence is an effort to level up a team's digital and technical knowledge and decision-making. I often talk to organizational leaders who recognize the need to bring technology to their work in order to improve customer experience, reduce labor, or increase data intelligence and accelerate decision-making. But when these efforts are nascent within an organization and the people responsible have limited experience with technology, this can result in very expensive decisions that negatively impact the organization. So what you can see is that ultimately investing in the wrong technology or channels or processes can cost more than doing nothing at all, but organizations must embrace digital to succeed today. The second factor that builds towards digital excellence is to develop realistic, actionable, and impactful next steps for both the immediate and long term. And this is about understanding cost, capability to deliver, and impact in order to prioritize the most effective technology, product, and service decisions, while also defining a roadmap based on both immediate and incremental steps towards what is profound organizational change as an outcome. Too often, existing services are left to languish while large technology projects are undertaken, often unsuccessfully. And it's really incremental change and continuous improvement that's an essential aspect of digital excellence. And that's why the third priority in building towards digital excellence is ensuring product and service feedback loops are in place. From a strategic point of view, setting objectives and key results with related key performance indicators offer an organizational-wide set of standards to measure efforts and measure outcomes. And it's the translation of these measurements to ongoing iteration that becomes critical to continued success. And this all plays into how we can bring intersectional approaches to our work. Now, underlying these pillars of digital excellence are three core values that I believe are essential to all of our everyday work. The first is usability, which ensures a frictionless, engaging, and delightful experience. And the second is accessibility, which ensures that no one is excluded from being served by an organization or prevented from engaging with content. Then finally, there's inclusivity, which means developing practices that authentically welcome key market segments who may traditionally have been ignored to engage meaningfully with your organization. So why am I focusing myself? Why am I passionate about digital excellence and the growth of digital maturity and these three core values, usability, accessibility, and inclusivity? It's because the research and the projects that I've worked on over the last decade have highlighted the value of these considerations over other approaches. So let's take a look at the ROI of these values. Usability increases conversions and builds brand advocates. It includes performance improvements, ease of use, reducing complexity, and increasing automation. With accessibility, we're removing barriers that prevent access to an organization's products, services, and content. Now, accessibility does take work. It can take more time up front. However, we've seen that it's far easier and more effective to bake accessibility into your processes from the beginning, rather than attempt to retrofit a product or service that was developed without accessibility in mind. a product or service designed for the average consumer typically costs more over time and usually becomes unmanageable because you eventually reach the limits of shortcuts that you would take when you're designing for an average that really doesn't exist. Meanwhile, an inclusive project can have a slightly higher upfront investment, but it delivers more value immediately and continues to deliver value over time, without the challenges of retrofitting and refactoring due to unforeseen or unplanned requirements. And despite this impact and the longevity of inclusive over average, as an industry, we're really failing to deliver on mandates that improve products and services for everyone. Looking at websites alone as a lens, in an automated review of the top 1 million websites, WebAIM found that 97.4% of homepages had accessibility failures this year. That's actually down just under 1% from last year. So if you're happy with a 0.7% improvement in our work that we do to deliver accessible websites, I guess that's something, but to me, that is a profound failure. And speaking of WebAIM, Jared Smith's speaking in about 4 hours or so, so feel free to tune into him. He's reviewing the report from this year and pulling out some guides and effective accessibility efforts that have come from that report. So that should be quite exciting. Now, in my day-to-day work, I've actually only seen websites that approach accessibility, usually with some gap, different levels, but there's a gap. And when I look at those in more detail, and the people that I work with look at those in more detail, we see that only about 10% of them are workable in the sense that they can be retrofitted to meet objectives around accessibility. But most of them, 90% of them, are really unworkable. And that, to us, means that the code is so poorly constructed that it impacts much more than accessibility. The lack of accessibility is just a symptom of an underlying failure. I've seen that 90% of websites are so poorly implemented that they hinder access, they hinder usability, and they hinder performance in collectively unfixable ways. And really, the only fiscally responsible way to meet these objectives is to throw out the code and many aspects of the design and content and take a new approach, which gets to that point that those shortcuts that you take to not bake accessibility and standards-based practices into the work really make it unmanageable over time and end up costing more than otherwise following an inclusive approach. And that means that you're not following an approach that can reach and engage with the full scope of your market. So with this lack of accessibility as a symptom of an underlying issue, issues that impact everyone, we start to see issues like slow loading, hard to understand language, difficult workflows, and broken interaction models. And that's where starting with that process of delivering products and services, the full diversity of your market really does improve access for all. And that's because inclusive and intersectional approaches allow you to better reach and serve the entirety of your market. So inclusivity at its most basic can include more welcoming language and imagery. But going deeper, it is about authentically engaging with the full diversity of your market in order to define products and services that deliver real value across your market. Ultimately, following the core values of usability, accessibility, and inclusivity leads to a series of benefits. You open up access to market, you reduce ongoing costs, you avoid alienating aspects of your market, and you grow engagements and conversions. You also reduce the risk of human rights offenses based on regional legislation, which can be focused on accessibility, but can extend beyond that as well. And you reduce costs on an ongoing basis. Underlying all of this, from digital excellence to inclusive design, are a series of methodologies that bring you closer to your customers, closer to your markets, to your users, and the people that your organization serves. And that's why together, digital excellence and inclusive design help you deliver products and services that better serve the increasingly diverse markets that make up all of our customer bases. So let's get back to the all-important question: are markets actually diverse? Talking about serving diverse markets, but Let's look into this in more detail. And a great place to start is with the myth of the average person. There's a commonly held tenet that designing for the average person allows us to serve about 80% of the market, and the rest is edge cases. If we focus on the average and avoid the edge cases, we get efficiency and we get scale. So why is this a fallacy? Simply put, it's because there is no average person. So where did this idea come from? In the 1840s, mathematician Adolphe Quetelet wanted to define the average man in terms of body proportions, height, and weight. And to calculate these proportions, he measured as many people as possible in order to gather data on a range of different body characteristics. And the result was the Quetelet index, and what we now know today or describe today as BMI, or the body mass index. And BMI itself has had several issues identified by the medical community, including its lack of basis in genuine physiology and variance. Ultimately, defining the average man was based on flawed physiological studies. So to then use a physical or physiological study to form the basis for making product and service decisions that impact markets and behavior is really nonsense. And so think of yourself, how your body feels right now, your moods, your day-to-day activities, when you commute, when you're at home, when you're out with friends or visiting family. There's so much nuance to who we are and how we engage with the world and even with ourselves on a day-to-day basis. When you consider all of this nuance and possibility, how can you define yourself as an archetype or persona with fixed characteristics that is reflective of who you are? We surely can't define archetypes that cover a wide range of all of us with all of this change even within ourselves. So let's not even focus on who you feel you are, but how you engage with the world. When you're at home versus on the go, you have different modes of engagement. You have different ways of interacting. Thinking just digitally, you may be on your phone while you commute or using a smartwatch at the gym, an iPad at home, a computer at work. All devices that you engage with differently or expect different things from based on your current environment and context of use. From a physical point of view, maybe you wear glasses. What if you don't have them on? What if you don't want to put them on? What if you're watching a video and you can't put the sound on because of where you are or who's around you? And what if you sprain your wrist tomorrow or break a leg? How does all of this impact you? So here's Microsoft's inclusive design persona spectrum, which highlights different states of being. And this image highlights that across touch, sight, hearing, and speaking, every one of us can have permanent, temporary, or situational changes in ability. With touch, a series of related examples could be a person who only has one arm. Well, someone may temporarily have an arm injury. And a situational example would be a parent holding a baby. In each of these cases, you're effectively going from an expectation that somebody may design something where you have two hands accessible to now you've only got one hand accessible in these circumstances. So how does that impact your engagement with a product or service? With hearing, a person may be deaf while someone else may have a temporary ear infection, which impacts their hearing. And other people may be in a loud environment. So there's a situational and environmental concern there about how they take in sound. Someone may be blind, while another person may have cataracts, or you could be a distracted driver. And the last example through the Microsoft's inclusive design persona spectrum relates to speaking. In this case, someone may be nonverbal permanently, while someone else may have temporarily have laryngitis. And situationally, someone may have a heavy accent. There are many other related examples of how touch, hearing, and sight and speaking can differ across people permanently, temporarily, or situationally. And understanding and designing with these variables in mind helps us deliver products and services for everyone. So does it matter that markets are becoming increasingly diverse? Should this really be impacting our work? Let's explore some of the factors that got us to today as an industry and how this is really exceedingly divorced from the myth of the average person. Globally, over the last 150 years, We've moved far from this failed science that Quetelet introduced. In fact, in the opposite direction. And this is only accelerating. Since Quetelet began his quest to define the average man, we've had no less than 3 major technology shifts that have exponentially accelerated our path towards individualism. The first was the advent of fast travel, which opened up our worldviews by breaking down geographic barriers and bringing diverse and wide-ranging cross-cultural connections to many millions of people who previously weren't able to have such varied firsthand experiences. And then the internet accelerated this even further by not just breaking down geographical barriers, but providing space for each of us to fully and authentically engage with like-minded people from any and all backgrounds and interests. Then came the smartphone, with instant access to the world's knowledge and real-time global communication at any moment in time, all while allowing us to develop stronger connections with diverse individuals anytime, anywhere. So these technologies and resulting behaviors have led to growing trends towards personal discovery and empowerment, self-awareness and self-acceptance, and have resulted in an increased freedom of expression and individuality. As a species, we have never looked like, been built like, or acted like any kind of average. Certainly, there were societal ideals and standards of behavior that lent a false credibility to the average person over the decades. But as we have accelerated our geographical and cultural mobility towards multiculturalism, pluralism, and mixed relationships, the lines have been radically blurred from any of these legacy ideals. And an increasingly self-aware society blurs those lines even further in recognizing gender identities, neurodiversity, and other characteristics and behaviors. Characteristics that move us so far beyond the possible average that we can hardly justify grouping people into any type of archetype or persona. This is the result of increasingly diverse markets. We need to move beyond the average, beyond the archetype, and work toward understanding all of the nuances of individuals. This approach is a shift from commonly employed design and marketing processes, suggesting that we do away with archetypes and personas. But it's one that offers so much more opportunity than making product or service decisions based on a flawed methodology. Embracing fluidity, intersectionality, and the diversity of market, that's the only way we can effectively serve the whole market. That's because people who use our products and services are all unique individuals with different goals and needs. So I want to just take a moment to define universal design, accessibility, and inclusive design. Universal design, accessibility, and inclusive design, to me, are fundamentally distinct. And I think that's really important to explore those distinctions. Universal design strives to deliver a single solution that serves as many people as possible, one size fits all. Where accessibility is focused on providing accommodations for people of all different abilities. Inclusive design goes further by considering many other intersectional factors of being. And this is where intersectional approaches to delivering products and services come in. So what is intersectionality? Intersectionality is a way of thinking about and thinking through how factors of identity, whether they be gender, race, sexuality, class, and more, interact with one another to form a clearer picture of who someone is. There are so many identities, circumstances, and fluid behaviors that influence our customers, both on a moment-to-moment basis and on a long-term basis. It's in understanding how these factors combine that we can more deeply understand an individual customer's priorities and their contexts of use. So an intersectional approach considers 3 key lenses: long-term factors such as identity, race, gender; temporary changes in ability or situation; and moment-to-moment shifts in factors like environment or mood. It's better to think about your market and the factors that influence your market as complex and fluid changing day to day, moment to moment, not as a snapshot in time. Thinking about the people that use your products and services in an intersectional way can be a guide for understanding how all of these factors link together and influence each other. As Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the term intersectionality, recently said, intersectionality is not just an abstract idea, it's a way of seeing and engaging. And there are many, or rather 3 primary categories of intersectional factors that can help you see and engage with the people who make up your market. Once again, they're identity, circumstances, and behavior and environment. And we'll dig into those in more detail. These 3 primary categories and related factors come together to form someone's behaviors and experiences in the world and in using your product or service. Factors that relate to a person's identity can include socioeconomic status, gender, culture, race, sexual orientation, and religious beliefs and worldview. With circumstances or other situations, you might be talking about geography, living situation, language, and ability, which can include motor skills, vision, learning, attention, and many other factors. And factors that might relate to a person's behavior or environment can include mood, internet connection, the device they're using, location, and context of use, what their current use case or job to be done may be. Making strategy and design decisions with intersectionality at the forefront will guide your team in identifying stronger product and service requirements by understanding the very individual natures of who each of your customers is. This awareness can guide your team in developing more appropriate individualized product specifications and design requirements, tailoring content to be inclusive and resonate with all of the diverse groups of people using your products and services, and identifying and tapping into new markets that have behaviors, goals, and needs that match with your product or service offering that you may not have previously considered. So by understanding how all of these factors mix and interact to form the experiences of your users, you can design your products and services in a much more intentional way. Once you establish standards and processes based on intersectionality, your product or service will be able to meet the goals and expectations of your market across different circumstances, different contexts, different environments, and really embrace their unique identity. This effectiveness is all driven by an understanding and advocacy for the diverse, unique individuals who make up your market, and delivering products and services that can be used and loved by more people, while improving the experience for your existing users. So let's consider a relatable example of how intersectional factors may influence your day-to-day as a consumer. If you consider your shifting needs while at home, at work, or with family, let's say you're planning a grocery shop or a trip or trying to pay a bill, your needs change when you're opening a website on your phone, while at a store, if you're commuting, or when you're at a desk. How you perceive, engage, or react to a product and service, or a call, or a conversation can be changed based on your mood, your expectations, past experiences, where you are in that moment, or how your day is going, all influence how you engage with anyone else, an organization, a product, or a service. Identity, circumstances, behavior, and environment all push us in different directions each and every day. Each person in your market embodies all of this nuance as individuals. Every market is made up of myriad diverse individuals, and it's up to us to follow practices to better serve them. That's why we believe it's best to avoid personas when developing products and services. So let's explore this in more detail. Let's talk about the pros and cons of personas as they traditionally exist. Since personas generalize a group of people into one representative person, they can give a team an overview of a target customer or group of customers. They outline high-level assumptions about customer preferences and behavioral patterns. But if a team's aim is to understand user needs, personas aren't the most effective tool. Personas alone can't reveal all of the moment-to-moment individual factors that influence people's needs. And they're typically not focused on information that reflects behaviors that affect the use of a product or service. Essentially, personas are great for humanizing customers by painting a picture of individual experiences within a larger group. And this increased empathy for users is a lot easier to foster when you have a document like a persona that details pain points and experiences. But personas are one way of doing this. They create a representative person, and they allow you to advocate for that person during product and service decision-making. That's positive. However, you shouldn't rely on them to define what larger demographic or affinity groups, especially diverse ones, might want. And they aren't what you should use as the only source of truth for products and services. Without a persona, you're still going to need a way to understand your customer and document that for your decision-making processes. Where personas and marketing conversations often focus on demographics, product and service decision-making is better supported by understanding behavior and need. The issue with edge cases as a concept as market audience or customer segmentation is that you miss out on the key quality of engagement that impacts your products and services, and that's behavior. As Joe Landman has shared recently on Twitter, people aren't edge cases, tasks are. And this goes to the heart of reframing how you consider the users of your products and services. So you don't need to scrap your existing personas, but instead redefine how you think about your users and how you think they might think and behave. By switching from categorizing users to thinking about behaviors, tasks, and goals, you'll have a much more accurate understanding of how a user might use and benefit from a product and service. One way that you can refactor personas and archetypes is to create states and context maps, which pair archetypes with details about the ways their circumstances and needs might affect their use of a product or service. So let's walk through some examples of states and contexts you can identify in your work. Some examples of user states could include distraction or attention level, cognitive needs, or needing content in a specific format, for example, audio or visual. Anything that involves individual factors and attributes like someone's 5 senses or cognitive state could be a factor in a user state. Some examples of user contexts could include a device that's being used, internet connection, and where a person is, their environment when they're using a product or service. So there's an image on screen now that is an example of how you can map states and contexts. It highlights and shows connections across a variety of factors that weave together to form a complex series of interconnected considerations that are shown to be subtly different for each person who you would identify as a customer and map to these factors. So the most important takeaway here is that none of these factors are exclusive to one particular market segment if you think about traditional demographics and segmentation. And the people who fall into each state or context are always changing. When we're mapping states and contexts, it means considering a variety of factors that will influence how each user engages with your product or your service. So in this example, we look at factors like social, sensory, dexterity, cognitive, communication, temporal, learning, device, and internet access. And again, when you're looking at your user groups and your user base and individuals who make up your market, you can map each person across these different factors and start to see how markets shift based on context. This way, we can work to understand how to deliver an improved product and service based on providing increasing value to customers based on their context and needs. And through this context and state mapping, you can highlight common patterns and blockers of behavior and adjust product and service strategy towards impacting those blockers and behaviors in service of your customer segments. Then we can layer in intersectional considerations. And with this combination that covers states and contexts, related segments, patterns and blockers of behavior, and intersectional factors, you'll really have an immensely rich series of considerations to design for. A set of considerations that go much deeper than traditional personas in ensuring you can better serve increasingly diverse markets. So I'd like to review what we've covered today and encapsulate all of this as we start to understand what the impact is of the fact that there really is no average person. The studies that led to this concept poorly measured external facets of a relatively homogeneous group of Northern Europeans. And not only were they flawed at the time, but the ensuing change bolstered by geographical, societal, and cultural shifts over the last 150 years have really made this concept nonsensical. And it's important to further understand that we all have shifting needs across touch, sight, hearing, and speaking. Understanding and designing with these variables in mind helps us deliver products and services for everyone. We're now more in touch than ever with who we are, and individuality is the new norm. This is influenced by a number of intersectional factors. Those three primary factors include identity, circumstances, and behavior and environment. Because of this, we need to embrace fluidity, intersectionality, and a diversity of market. It's the only way we can effectively serve the whole market. And investing in inclusive approaches saves money over time and opens up access to market. Despite this market opportunity and the improved long-term efficiency, 90% of websites, greater than 90% of websites, actively prevent access, usability, and content engagement. We must do better as an industry. Accessibility failures themselves are typically a symptom of underlying issues that impact everyone. So we need to do a better job of it as an industry of following standards-based practices that fulfill the promise of our platforms to deliver more accessible products and services. By bringing inclusive practices to your work, you can improve access for all. And to get there, it's best to avoid personas when designing products and services. Think instead in terms of customer behavior and needs rather than demographics. By mapping states and contexts, we can gain a clearer picture of behavior and needs. This is where we consider these factors: social, such as cultural background, gender identity, or socioeconomic status; sensory, which can include sight, hearing, touch, and so on; dexterity, such as the ability to use a mouse or tap on elements; cognitive, such as different neurodiverse attributes like ADHD or autism, or ways that people learn or comprehend information; communication, which includes written, out loud, and visual; temporal, such as the preferred engagement time or duration spent with a product or service; learning, including different learning styles and preferences; devices such as computer, tablet, or phone; and internet access, whether that could be good, poor, or in fact non-existent. When we segment from context and state maps, we frame user needs more effectively than personas. And then if we layer intersectional factors onto these segments, it helps us better serve increasingly diverse markets. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share this, and I'd love to get into a discussion with our remaining time. I can hopefully seed some conversation if we are waiting on some questions by asking, is there a concept from today, from the discussion now, that you would be inspired to bring to your work? And following that, if there's a next step question I can help answer to apply these learnings with your day-to-day, feel free to ask. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lee. That was a very hefty and wonderful talk. Lots to think about.
Yeah, I feel
Gareth.
like I need to go and have a bit of a lie down. Bit of a think about this. I have two pages of my own questions, but there is stuff that's coming in from the crew and all sorts of places. So I'm really at the moment, I'm just going to grab a question kind of randomly, and I'm actually going to talk with the first one that actually came from to me on Slack, which was the question was, what strategies have you found to be successful for pushing against conscious and unconscious institutional bias? And that was from Eric.
Yeah, I think, there's an intent that I have behind this talk that I think we're here today at Inclusive Design 24, and I know that a lot of peers and people tuning in and the conversations we're having are with people who buy into these processes already. And I think part of my intent behind the talk is to communicate with people who aren't yet drinking the Kool-Aid that is so important to drink. And so that's where I talk a lot about the ROI and understanding that there are outcomes here that are beneficial, that we could all argue are ethical obligations of our industry. But then for people who aren't thinking in those terms and are thinking more in a business term, we've seen this work profoundly impact organizations in a very positive way from an ROI point of view. And we talk about that idea of spending a little bit more time up front or a little bit more cost up front and then delivering long-term value. So I'm not sure that I'm directly answering the question if it's specifically about individual biases within an organization, but I think I've had 3 conversations in the last 2 weeks where people say, well, we want to make accessible websites, but we don't really have the budget to do that. And we can't really get people to buy into that extra work. And so my argument is that's the wrong way to look at this, the same way that designing for the average is the wrong way to look at the products and services that we're delivering, because we're not serving the markets. We're chasing after a unicorn of segmentation that isn't relevant to today.
Yeah. I'll pick up on a couple of things. Well, one thing you said there and something you said within the presentation. You said at one point that markets are becoming increasingly diverse. Do you think that's true, or are we just becoming more aware of their diversity?
Yeah, it's a combination of both, right? And I made that point a couple of times that markets have always been diverse. And so we've done ourselves a disservice by ignoring that actively. And this is all about bringing intention to our work because of that. But the point, again, if you're having a conversation with somebody who isn't buying into this, the point behind talking about the increasing diversity is that you can argue certainly that well, nothing's changed. And that could be your attitude and say, well, I've always operated this way and we've seen success, so be it. And I would argue that no, despite that, you've seen success because you've been ignoring whole swaths of your market. But then we can point to those trends that show that markets are becoming increasingly diverse because we are breaking down. And again, I'm talking about over the last 150 or the last 50 years, not the last 5 years. Yeah. But we have broken down geographical barriers. We have engaged more with people from across the globe. So at a larger trend level across the last 50 to 150 years, we have significantly changed society and culture globally. In the last 30 years, we can just say that we've done a terrible job of serving the people who make up our markets. So either way, I'm happy if either of those takeaways come out of this.
That's really good. It actually cuts across quite a few questions that I've got lined up, and I'm trying not to repeat stuff. So, but there was other things. So there's going to be a couple of tangents, I think, within this. So if you don't mind, I hope that's okay.
Please.
But yeah, I mean, there was another thing that, you used the Microsoft inclusive design model, which is the personas within this, and they sort of present intersectionality, but they do it within siloed barrier groups. So how do designers use that and then actually get use that in a way that they get intersectionality happening across the groups that it represents, not just within them.
Across the groups. So sorry, can you describe again the group that you're referring to?
The things you see this is one of those things that often happens in conversations in organizations when they want to talk about accessibility or diversity within user need. And they go, what do deaf people want and what do blind people want? Intersections across all of this. And as you've already talked about, within inclusive design, inclusive design cuts across all of these needs, because then you're also dealing with mood and social and cultural and situational and environmental. And there are, there's commonalities and massive differences between the different intersectional groups. It's a weird matrix of stuff. How can designers get to grips with that?
Yeah, I think, the acknowledgement that's important is this idea that we have traditionally segmented people based on very narrow demographics and other views of who they are. So you just use the example of saying, okay, if deaf people as a group, who are they? Well, they're deaf people. And someone else might say, well, single mothers from 25 to 35 or single mothers from 25 to 35. Well, when you start to look at the intersectional factors that impact any segmentation, and those are clear ones where somebody's made a decision and said this is a group, there's not a single person in there who at a very granular level is going to exhibit the same behaviors as someone else in that group. But even if we go a step further and say, rather than individual nuanced behavior, let's look at some key intersectional factors. Socioeconomic status can impact how you engage with the world. Every group like that, where you're narrowly saying age or geography or some kind of ability, has varying ranges of socioeconomic. That can impact things like the devices they're using or the internet access that they have. So rather than from a product and service point of view, saying, let's try to figure out every single intersectional factor of every single customer we serve, that's where we talk about the context mapping and look at those other factors and how they map to, you can use an archetype and say, I'm going to use this concept of a person and see how they use our products and services. But when you're doing that, you're thinking about behavior, you're thinking about intent, you're thinking about understanding, and all of those other nuanced factors, so that you're designing for a behavioral outcome and not for a hypothetical person.
Right. I think you partly just answered somebody's question online that Kelsey asked, how do you best divert the question about disability statistics to help gather more appropriate, helpful, mindful, and intentional information instead? And I think you've kind of gone some way within that, but is there anything that you can do as a model or an approach? Is
that the concept? When I don't know if you get a sense of that when you say disability statistics, are you talking about the size of the market share of someone of a?
Well, disability statistics is always an interesting one, because are you talking about barrier? Are you talking about condition? Are you talking about people who self-declare or even recognize themselves as or label themselves as? And it's you start doing air quote marks around those kind of, it's a difficult one, which interestingly enough, she stuck quote marks around disability statistics. So I think she's
right. Well, yeah,
of that interpretation.
Well, I think I go back to the common things that we hear. I mentioned earlier that I've had 3 conversations in the last week with developers who said, well, we don't have budget to do accessibility stuff. We'd love to. And it's kind of the same, there's a similar adage that I hear that is, it's only 6 to 7% of our market. It's the edge case. So let's not worry about it. And I think that's where we found this very unexpected outcome for us, as we've been, and I'm saying we, I keep shifting between I and we. My day-to-day work at Say Yeah, where we've done a series of audits over the years. And one of the things that has been coming up more and more recently is the idea that the lack of accessibility, for example, on a web site, is a symptom. and it's a symptom of a kind of underlying rot with the delivery of the website and what the website is from an experiential point of view, but more importantly from a code point of view. And so I don't have conversations with the people that we work with about market share around accessibility. I have conversations about providing a better experience for everybody, because when we deal with that underlying rot, we are improving access for everybody, because you're talking about making performance improvements. You're talking about being intentional about making accessibility improvements as well. But with that comes all of the benefits of anybody in a different context or state, where if you have captions on your videos or if you have a transcript, you're not relying on the audio. And that can affect anybody. It doesn't have to serve people who require an accommodation all the time. It can serve people who require an accommodation in that moment, which is where the Microsoft chart is great to reference.
Just going into sort of UX obstacles, preferences, because you talked about this in segmentation a bit, and you started talking about need and behaviors as as the segmentation model. And I suppose from what you're saying, then in these UX barriers, let's call those, the things that we worry about within accessibility, the preferences people have as part of their coping strategies, and socioeconomic barriers, affording the technology and having access to the technology that will enable your access and what you're having to use. So you're saying that's kind of that. Is that what you're saying? Is that's the sort of the lens that we should be taking?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we just finished a project where we kept getting asked for personas around segmentation. So we were saying that there's a segment of the market that will not use your product online, and they kept coming back. Oh, well, who is that? Is it people over 50? Yes, it's also people under 50. Because it's not about their age, it's about their behavior and all of those lenses. And there are, when you look at those factors, internet access is a really critical factor, device is a really critical factor, because it completely changes your engagement with the digital world. Mm. So not considering those as the lens. So instead of saying who is it, but how do they, we can really reframe how we deliver products and services to serve that use case.
Thank you very much, Patrick.
Excellent. Now, again, great talk and great Q&A. It's like a little mini talk in its own right that we just did.
I hope that's good.
It is. Right. So for the audience at home, if you like this session, like and subscribe, as the kids say, on YouTube. You can find us on youtube.com/inclusivedesign24. And if you subscribe, you'll be kept in the loop on all our future events. A reminder that ID24 is a respectful community, and you can find our code of conduct on the Inclusive Design 24 website. Inclusive Design 24 is brought to you with thanks to our supporters: Adobe, TPGI Arc, Fable, Intopia, Tetralogical, Center for Inclusive Design, InfoAxia, Intuit, Web Directions AAA Accessibility Conference, Adrian Rosselli LLC, and CanAccess. Inclusive Design 24 will be back on the hour with our next session. See you then.